Welcome back to part 3 of chapter 11, Managing Organizational Change, Resistance, and Conflict. So where we're leaving off on this part 3 is developing or adopting a strategy for change. So here are 4 basic strategies for change. The first is the rational or empirical approach. Picture, purpose, part to play. So it's that idea of a cooperative, let's show where we're going. Imagine this, here's the reason we're doing it, and here is how you play a part in this change. Okay, so that's one way. Normative or re-education approach, focus on core values, beliefs, establishing relationships that make up the culture of the group. So remember, we've talked about establishing a culture and how the culture of the organization tends to be the starting point for the culture of a project team. However, we can change that. Or in fact, that project team can end up having a very negative culture that is not in a line with the strategies, visions, and mission of the organization. Okay, so we have to keep that in mind. So as we talk about strategies for change, this idea of saying, here's why we're changing, because it matches our beliefs, it matches our core values, it helps with our customer relations, whatever the case may be. Then there's the idea of power or coercive approach. So compliance through the exercise of power. And I've given you an example here of a great book that I just read called Cyber Strategy. It's a little older book, but Cyber Strategy, the evolving character of power and coercion. Okay, so what this book examines is the emerging art of cyber strategy and its integration as part of a larger approach to coercion by states, right, by actors within the international system, if you will. Cyber coercion represents the use or manipulation, denial, or punishment strategies, i.e. coercion, right? So we take those back into our focus here of the project team. Are we in fact, right, manipulating or somehow punishing or denying end users something just to force change, right? And we definitely don't want to do that, Environmental adaptive approach, although people may avoid disruption and loss, they can still adapt to change. Okay, so there is that idea of the avoidance. And believe it or not, people who are so set against a growth mindset may in fact quit. You may end up losing valuable people because you've implemented a new system. They're so stressed about it, they're going to go find a company to work for that still uses the old system or still does things the way they're comfortable with. And the fact is, I don't want you to think about, oh, well, wow, great, they left, big deal, whoop-de-doo, we'll replace them. Because in fact, we really want to ask that question, how many other people are going to leave? And if these are the people that we've relied on as assets for our organization, there becomes a learning curve, right, that we have to then implement, thus taking forth or delaying the return on investment for the project that we've done. Anytime I walk into a new organization, even though I'm certified in, say Microsoft Server, anytime I have to look at a new implementation of Microsoft Server and Active Directory, they're all going to be different. Okay, and that creates stress for me, So implementation of change management, plan and track progress. So again, just like with every other aspect of the project, we are going to document what worked and what didn't work, and are we on schedule? Are we off schedule? Are we getting behind? We want to watch out for the rumor mill, as we talked about. No, this isn't gossip, it's the truth, right? So the water cooler communication, if you will. Media is important, how we present this information, must flow in both directions. So again, as much as we talk, we then need to listen, okay? And we've talked about the importance of listening to people's concerns, even if the change is not going to address their concerns, okay? Must flow in both directions, talked about that. What you don't say is as much important as you do say. So think about the fact that, as that rumor mill gets going, people are communicating. You want to know that they're communicating the correct, right, and factual information, instead of information that is constantly damaging the project that you're trying to do for the organization. So we want to then, as we do this, as we have this plan to implement change, to become change agents, to manage change, to manage conflict, to deal with resistance, whatever the case may be, we definitely want to document this and learn from those lessons because, again, we're not going to do everything right, and we can learn how to do it differently next time. So lessons learned, experiences should be documented and made available to other project teams. By the way, they call this managerial knowledge. So managers are always taking risks to make things better if they're great managers, and then they will document what worked and didn't work, sometimes even creating a knowledge base so that we don't continue to do things, or a new manager doesn't come in and try things that the old manager tried that failed multiple times. Best practices, of course, the idea of consistent communication, focusing on what's in it for the person. Again, getting them on board by saying, this is going to make your job easier. This is going to allow you to do your work faster, thus creating more opportunity for you to reach more customers, thus make more money, whatever the case may be. And again, we've talked about this previously. We need to know what motivates each and every person. So what is going to motivate the people on our team to cooperate versus motivate them to create additional resistance or conflict? Determine, support needs. Where do people go for help? Again, anytime, I happen to believe in what's called the train the trainer, which means we train the people who are then going to train their peers. Okay? So it's not this manager training people, it's peers training people to do the process correctly. Okay? Measure and communicate progress, quick wins. Hey, great, that worked. Let's do something else. Build the need for change, burning platform, if you will. So, hey, if we don't make this change and our competitors are making change and we don't develop this new thing or, utilize this software to make our business better, we're going to lose customers. And in essence, we're going to need to downsize, ensure visible, consistent sponsorship, we've already talked about this, allow the disenchanted event. And this simply means to listen and listen and listen. We don't necessarily need to implement change so that they feel better. Okay, sometimes they're going to feel better just by us listening. But there's also the fact that when we listen, remember we talked about this, the experts are the people that are doing the work every day. The expert chop saw operator knows how best to do his or her job. And when we listen to them on how best to do his or her job, we can implement a better means of them doing their job that they're going to support. So it's not just about listening to them vent, it's about listening and hearing ideas that we can generate that make them more supportive of the change that we're implementing. So resistance should be anticipated from the onset of the project. Resistance can be either overt, in the form of memos, meetings, etc., or covert, form of sabotage, foot dragging, politicking. Oh, well, I didn't want this change, so I'm not going to support it, or, oh, well, you know what, that project's going to fail and it's going to hurt our organization and it's going to hurt our department, But we need to understand that resistance and conflict are going to exist. If we are creating an environment for improvement, there is going to be resistance and there's going to be conflict. And I think I've mentioned this already, but it's worth mentioning again. When I was doing my master's program, there were instructors that would basically assign certain number of students, a certain percentage of the class, who weren't allowed to take the opinion of the class, but to generate that resistance and to basically create conflict so that we knew when we all came back together that we were making the best choices. We weren't just bandwagoning to get done with the class and be done, Resistance due to cultural or behavioral reasons is harder to rationalize, but still can keep a project from reaching an intended goal. So we've already talked about understanding and knowing the culture. Why people resist change, I would just go ahead and pause this and read this directly so that you understand. And if you really are in a place of self-assessment, you can come up with these same ideas by just asking why it is that you resist change. So let's continue on. Hopefully you paused and did that. Conflict management, so focuses on preventing, managing, or resolving conflicts. We have to have a means of doing this. Sometimes it's as easy as a democratic vote or a confidential vote, and great, this is how the majority voted, and we're moving on. We're not going to sit here and talk about it for the next month. It's important to identify potential conflicts as early as possible. Of course, we're going to be able to view conflicts between two people in a meeting, and know who's strong in their opinion, who's willing to listen to others' opinions, etc. Negative conflict left unresolved can lead to damaging relationships, mistrust, unresolved issues, continued stress, dysfunction. So the fact is, if we know that there's conflict that exists, we need to address it. And again, one way to address that conflict is in fact to assign people to be the conflict agent. Okay? To have to take the point of conflict. And by assigning them to it, they're not really responsible for what they think, if you will. Maybe they absolutely support it, but suddenly their mind is open to the fact that, oh, wait a minute, I've been assigned to be the bad person here. I've been assigned to be the bad cop instead of the good cop. So how do I do that? Conflict management. So a couple last statements on conflict here. Just go ahead and pause and read this. And then you can move on. In fact, conflict ignored is more likely to get worse, which can significantly reduce project performance. And the fact is, any conflict not addressed is bound to get worse, okay, and affect whatever it is exponentially the longer it's allowed to go on. So as we look at types of conflict, traditional view, so all conflict should be avoided. So that's the avoidance model of conflict. Why can't we just all get along, right? Contemporary view, or what's called the human relations view, conflict is inevitable, it's natural. We sort of build this acceptance to conflict. Thus, when it happens, we don't look at it as negative. Okay, we look at it as a positive. It's the idea of let's agree to disagree. So we don't have to agree on everything. We can just agree to disagree. Sometimes you're going to be right. Sometimes I'm going to be right, but perhaps no one is ever really truly wrong, if that makes sense. Okay, there's a huge difference between telling somebody they're wrong and supporting the fact that they're just simply not right in this case, whatever the case may be. Negative conflict, of course, can be damaging. Interactionist view, so conflict is necessary for performance. It's the devil's advocate. It's what I talked about that my instructors tried to create or forced creation of, the interactionist view of conflict, by assigning those devil's advocates who could not just simply side with the group and bandwagon. They created the conflict necessary for us to make sure that the decisions we were making were true decisions that were going to support the organization, the project, whatever it could be. In this case, support the papers that we wrote or the case studies we were reviewing. So approaches to conflict. Again, here's some examples. Notice assertiveness on one axis, cooperativeness on the other. So, if we're not very assertive and uncooperative, we avoid. If we're low assertive but very cooperative, we will accommodate. Somewhere in the middle, I wish that was in green versus red because it's good, compromising. And then, of course, assertiveness. If we're highly assertive and uncooperative, we're competing with each other. That's not going to help. And then, of course, if we're assertive and we're cooperative, we're going to collaborate. Okay, so we want to get up to that upper right quadrant as much as we can. Accommodating, forcing, compromise, bargaining, collaboration. This is where we want to get. We want to get up here. We want to stay right here. Compromise, and then, of course, above compromise is the idea of collaboration. When we collaborate, we're bringing in everyone's support. Okay, now that's not always going to happen, but we should always gear towards compromise. So finally, I want to leave you with this. So approach the conflict situation. Each conflict situation is unique, and the choice of the approach to resolve it should be considered. Sometimes, folks, the only means to resolving a conflict is to say, we're done with it. This is what we're doing. We're moving on. Done. Okay? Or else conflict can become a negative, well, as we know, to a project in the aspect of time. So type of conflict, its relative importance to the project, time pressure to resolve the conflict. A lot of times the best way to do it is to say, okay, you have 5 minutes, you have 5 minutes, you have 5 minutes, then we're voting. So tell us what you want to tell us, and then we're going to vote. Position of power, authority of the parties involved. Again, the project manager always tends to have more authority. And then, of course, the stakeholders have even higher authority. So if there's conflict and it needs to be brought up to the stakeholders, that's a good idea because it takes it outside of the project team. The stakeholder makes a decision. We have to roll with it. Whether the emphasis is on maintaining the goals, objectives of the project, or maintaining relationships. Because a lot of times, a relationship is going to be affected by a project or by decisions that are made, and we all know this. So finally, let's talk about Ronald Reagan's quote, who says, "Peace is not absence of conflict. It is the ability to handle conflict by peaceful means." So as you move forward in this, consider how you can implement peaceful means to manage conflict and move your projects forward in the future. Take care, and I hope you have a great day.